Hi, I'm Jim Moyna, and there's 15 revelations that I've discovered while using Lowrance's Active Target. Okay, first of all, number one would be you're not going to separate fish tight to the bottom from the bottom. And it seems like this is more so the case the further out the fish is. It just seems like bottom separation at a distance is less effective than like right under the boat. Right under the boat, it seems like I can get a little more detail, a little more definition, but even then, a fish sitting right on the bottom is going to just blend in with the bottom. And that's just been my experience. And just to give you an example, um, let's say I'm fishing a jerkbait for smallmouth, and I might see one on a screen. I'll throw over there. I'll see that fish just kind of hesitantly rise up, then just straight, then right out of the bottom signal. I won't see a fish down there. Right out of the bottom signal, a more active fish that wants to steal that bait will come skyrocketing out of the bottom signal, and the race is on with this other one to get to that bait. And I've seen that many times. So I guess that's a negative, but sorry to start with a negative, but that just happens to be the first thing on my list. Okay, the next thing. When it comes to seeing fish on the unit, it seems like the lower the light, the more tendency for fish to rise up off the bottom to where you can actually see them. Now, this is true for walleyes. This is true for the crappies, for the smallmouth, the largemouth, pretty much most anything. And just to give you a little background of where I've been using my active target the most, it's been on clear northern bodies of water, clear natural lakes. The lake where I've used the most would be classified as a mesotrophic lake, where the species are largemouth, smallmouth, walleye, northern pike, yellow perch, bluegill, crappie, and burbot. So but I just, every time, like if I do it in the middle of the day, you see some, but then if you go right at dusk, man, there's just stuff all over the place that you just don't see during high noon. All right, 3. Active target's a great tool for judging the potential of an area. Now, and there's 2 ways, well, 3 ways really. First of all, just by scanning around with it, you can see how many fish are out there. But like I said, sometimes they can blend in the bottom. So, even though you may not see a fish, if you have the active target pointed at your lure as you retrieve it, and you can actually see fish rise off the bottom up to it, and either they strike it or they don't. So that gives, so just being, even if they don't strike it, you can still at least see the fish that are there. And another, even a better way is if you do actually hook a fish, then of course, especially with smallmouth, a lot of times that hook fish will draw the attention of other fish in the area. And I've seen this many times where I'll see one blip out there, throw out there, hook that blip, and just the commotion of that fighting fish, all of a sudden you'll see all these other signals just start appearing out of the bottom, or they come up from the side where you don't see them. So it gives you a great assessment as to potential of an area. Are you just catching a single fish, or are there lots of other fish there? Very, very cool for that. And then, speaking of fish rising to the lure, it's actually seems as though I have more fish rise to the lure than what actually strikes the bait, which is kind of frustrating, and it makes you second guess your presentation, but that can be a good thing. Actually, that's another point I want to make is, if you do see all these fish rising to your bait and you're not really getting many of them to hit it, well, that's a good cue that, hey, maybe I need to adjust my presentation, whether it's a complete bait change or simply a variation in the retrieve that I'm using. So it's a good cue. If you just see all these fish rising to your bait, not hating it, it's a good cue to make some kind of adjustment. Next would be another good point about it is it allows you to track weed lines and to pinpoint your casts on those weed lines. Let's say you have a pattern where the fish are right on the edge of the weeds or just outside of the weeds. Well, you don't want to, without the active target, you may be casting too far up into the weeds at times, or you may be throwing too far out from the weeds at times. With the active target, I can put my cast, right along that edge just about every time. So that's pretty cool for that. Next, there is I would estimate about a 1 second delay on the active target. And by that, I mean, let's say I'm hopping a jig. So I hop the jig, and then on the screen, it'll be 1 second later when I actually see that hop. And it's not that big a deal. This doesn't take that much getting used to, but it does catch you by surprise sometime, because say I'm reeling in a spinnerbait and I see a fish closing the distance, and there'll still be a little bit of distance there, but then all of a sudden I feel the strike. So the strikes come a little they come a little sooner than what you expect if you're just solely looking at that screen. So there's a 1 second delay. The next revelation I've noticed is how busy these fish can be sometimes. And I mean really busy, especially when there's kind of a bites on. It's like I'll be scanning an area, and I'll fish through an area, and I might be just sitting in one place. Let's say it's a calm day. I'm sitting in one place, and I'll just scan. And I'll see fish just swimming this way, fish swimming that way, to the boat, away from the boat. And here's the curious thing. I noticed, I think these are bluegills. A lot of times I'll be over a weed bed, and I'll see these bluegills rise up to the transducer of the trolling motor. So they must be interested in what's going on there. I'll see them rise up and then go back down, and they seem like they're smaller signals, so I'm guessing they're just like bluegills. But anyways, the fish are really busy. And let's say I'll be focusing in one zone over here, casting, and there's nothing going on, and then I'll scan over this way, and then I might make a few casts at a target over here, and then all of a sudden I'll scan back, and over where I was just a couple minutes ago, all of a sudden there'll be some new fish just sitting there on the screen. I'm like, where did these come from? And you'll just see fish just swimming around, moving around, especially the smallmouths seem to be really busy out there. Walleyes seem to be a little more mellow. I can't tell the difference between walleyes and smallmouth or suckers, but although I'm starting to get an idea what the sucker schools look like, and if I throw a bait at a school of suckers, there's just no movement by the signals. It seems like if I throw a bait over by smallmouths or walleyes, they make some kind of move just about every time. But then again, a lot of the times they don't strike. So, and that's the other thing between the walleyes and smallmouths. Let's say I'm throwing a jerkbait, and I'll see a signal there. I'm not sure if it's a walleye or smallmouth. I'll throw over there, and you'll just see the signal will just suddenly just zip, make a beeline right for the jerkbait, hit it, reel it in. One time it'll be a smallmouth. Next time, the same exact scenario. Everything looks identical. Those walleyes, man, they'll rocket right for that jerkbait. Just like the smallmouth. All of a sudden, the signal will just be still. Then all of a sudden, the fish must notice the jerkbait and just rockets right for it. So I don't know if it's gonna be a smallmouth or a walleye when I finally get the fish up to the boat. So next. Let's see. I guess I covered that a little bit. Typically, I run my, the lake that I fish in is pretty clear water, so I run it with It's got different set noise rejection settings. So typically I run it on the low setting. That's what I've been running it on. And then also, just to mention, I'll say I usually run it at about 80 feet distance. At times, I guess maybe I should try playing around with 100, but 80 seems to be pretty good. But it's back to the noise part of it. To minimize your noise even better, a good thing to do is, two things you can do. One would be to just shut down the sonars of your other units. So, for example, if I got the unit on my driver's console going, well, I'll go back there and there's a setting where you can just hit stop sonar, so you can stop that stuff. The other thing you can also do is run some bigger gauge wires and run it and take all your electronics offline of your other boat's electrical system and run its own electrical system. There is a company that makes a harness called Sea Clear, and they make a harness just for that. And I have installed that in my boat, and it did improve that a little bit. So next would be I can't read my writing because I'm trying to look younger by not wearing these reading glasses. So what's it say? It says, okay. The active target comes with a very narrow beam, and there's no adjustment for it that I know of anyway. So that might be good. You know what, Lowrance? If there's any way that you could put a setting on there where you can adjust that beam, that would be kind of a good thing. But as it comes with a really narrow beam, and that's beneficial, but also not beneficial. It's beneficial in that when you do get a target on your screen, you can, you have that thing absolutely pinpointed. You know, you got the scale on your screen across the top telling you the distance it's out, and the head of your trolling motor is going to be pointing dead straight at that. I'm using the Minn-Kota Ultrex, so the head of my Ultrex is going to be pointing dead straight at that target because I have obviously I have the transducer aligned perfectly with the direction of the head of that trolling motor. So I use that as my gauge to pinpoint my cast, so I can get my cast like really, really close to that fish, or let's say I want to cast beyond it. You know, I can do that too. So, but the detriment of that super narrow beam is it can be difficult to keep your targets actually on the screen. So if let's say you're just trying to find a brush pile or something. Really, you got to have that thing on the nuts in order to have these things on the target. So it's kind of a benefit, but not a benefit. It's there. So next, we've got a few more here. One thing I like to do is I do like to point my boat straight at the target if I can. So let's say I've got a waypoint with a brush pile. I'm going to come dead straight. I'm going to come straight at it with the nose of the boat, and that's because I like having that trolling motor head aligned straight ahead, because that gives me just better. I can just visualize the cast I need to make easier to make that pinpoint cast. Now, sometimes as I'm scanning, all of a sudden I'll see something out 90 degrees perpendicular to the boat, and it's just a lot more difficult to, especially if the boat's if there's any kind of forward movement of the boat, that even is more challenging. But trying to make that perpendicular cast to that target is just a bit more challenging with your beam going perpendicular to the boat. So I do like to approach my waypoints, dead straight ahead. And which kind of brings me to my next point I want to make is I also like to work into the wind. So I want to keep I want to keep my waypoints and my targets upwind, straight upwind, with the boat straight downwind. And that's just so I can, you don't want to blow up onto your school of fish. You don't want to blow up onto the structure you're fishing, because that's just an opportunity to alarm the fish to your presence. So just avoid that by staying downwind. And if I'm scanning, let's say I'm scanning and I notice something here at the 2 o'clock position, I may even let the boat blow downwind a little bit, and I'll swing over and try to get straight downwind of it. That's just, for me, I like to keep my stuff straight ahead of the boat. It's just easier for the pinpoint casts and so on. Next, I already talked about that one. Next, after that, okay, this is just common sense. The bigger bait you throw, the easier it will be to see and track on your screen. If you're throwing a Ned rig or a little tiny jig of some kind, it's kind of hard to track it. You can pick it up. It will pick it up. Even a little black marabou jig, you'll pick that up. But it's just harder. It's just harder to. Now compare that to like a 1/2 ounce chatterbait with a big trailer on there. That's really easy. In fact, as that blade goes, as that blade wobbles, you can actually see how the signal like catches the flatness of that blade at times, because all of a sudden the signal will like all of a sudden just flat. It'll just flicker really bright for just a split second, and you just know that's when that signal just happened to catch that blade as it like somehow faced right towards that transducer. So keep that in mind. And it can be hard to track your baits when it's windy or your boat's got a lot of forward momentum. It's hard to track the baits, and sometimes it's better just not to worry about it. But if it's calm, it's much easier to track your baits. And the importance of tracking your baits, it is important at times, because like I talked about earlier, you can judge the potential of an area by actually seeing the fish rise up to the bait, how many fish are rising up to the bait. And then don't forget, when you do hook a fish, try to track it, with your trolling motor, and by that I mean the transducer's mounted on the trolling motor. So pivot your trolling motor around trying to track that hooked fish. Just pick up other curious fish that want to check it out. All right, let's see, just a couple left here. Shallow water. The times I've used it in shallow water, it just doesn't. I don't know. It's not working for me. It seems like I get too close to my targets before I actually recognize that they're there. And if there's any advice people can give me for shallow water, please put a comment in there, because and any other kind of advice, because really I'm learning this thing like everybody else is, and I'm sure there's many things I don't know. In fact, I'll probably have to make another video like this with more things I've learned. All right, and okay, the last thing I want to say is it's helped me. It helps me read location, structure quicker, because you can read. First of all, you can see how much bait's in the area. You just get more a more read on the targets that are down there. The rocks, the brush piles, the weeds, and just let me make another note about rock. Okay. The farther out that a rock is, the taller that rock has to stand above the bottom in order for you to read it. Okay, and that goes back to what I said about bottom separation. The bottom separation is less further away from the transducer you go. So let's say I start seeing a rock at about 60 feet. I'll barely notice it, and then as I approach it, you'll just be able to see how it just starts standing out more and more and more. And then when you get right over it, it's like a very clear picture of that rock when you get really close to it. So, but it does, you know, with weeds grow tall off the bottom, so those are easy to pick out at a distance. And then, of course, you can see the short little weeds once you get closer. Um, and it just helps to read. It really helps to read the locations quicker and easier. And when you change locations and you recognize, you know, let's say you were on one location that had fish, you can, you know, make a log in your mind of what sort of conditions and elements were, you know, involved at that location. And then as you start checking out different spots in the lake, you can make mental comparisons to where you currently are, compare that to where the fish were, and you can maybe quickly identify, hey, this spot here there's no rocks at all. There's no fish, or boy, I sure was seeing a lot more bait where them fish were hanging out as compared to the spot I'm on now. So it's good for that diagnosing different places in the lake to fish and so forth. So there you have it. There is several revelations that the Lowrance Active Target has helped me with and shown me. There's going to be more to come, I'm sure, and when they do, I will eventually pass them on. So anyways, go out, catch some fish, have some fun. Over.